been a long while since I've done any update videos related to the backhoe, but here's a little bit of an update. I haven't recorded much. I've been pretty busy with stuff, and it just hasn't worked out where I've had the time to actually go through and kind of have you follow along with the projects I've been working on. Now, the last time I used this machine, I had a big problem develop, and the crankcase ended up filling up with a combination of diesel fuel and the oil that was in there. What happened, as far as I can tell, is the original mechanical fuel pump that bolted to the engine block, the diaphragm had a tear, and what it did is it basically gravity fed the fuel from the tank through the fuel line and poured it into the crankcase until it filled up. So much so that I noticed the fuel pressure was lower than it should have been. I still had about 10 pounds. Normally I'm closer to 30. And ultimately, out of the overflow, I was getting a spew of diesel oil combination. So I shut the machine down, started troubleshooting, checked the oil level, and as soon as I pulled the dipstick out, it was a geyser of fluid coming out from the block. So I definitely knew there was an issue. With COVID that happened, I was still waiting for a mechanical fuel pump. I was trying to find if there's one in stock that I could get that was a reasonable price, and it was recommended to me a few times to just go with an electric pump. So I finally went with an electric pump. I made a very simple flat steel mount for it, which also doubles as a block-off plate, because there is a hole there where the finger for the original pump would actually be driven by a cam, but I just sealed that off. So it's always revertible. Like the way that I set this up, I can always go back to a mechanical pump. The original fuel lines are still in the same position. I just adapted to it and added a switched feed line for the pump itself. So now when you turn the key, you've got fuel pressure from an electric pump drawing from the tank, feeding the heavy pump on the other side. And so far, it's been a lot more reliable to start. I've only started it a couple times since, but actually today is going to be a bit of a test. I'm going to start it and idle it for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to shut it down, let the oil level settle down, and see if there's any additional fluid in that oil and find out what the oil pressure is like, because that was kind of the symptom last time that showed me what was going on with the oil, with the diesel leak last time. So from what I can tell, the first mechanical pump was my issue, and I'm really hoping that it's not the second high pressure pump, but we're going to test that today without moving the machine just to see what happens. And I also replaced the tube in that tire, which in itself was a bit of a task, but I was able to get it completed. I'm proud that I could do it with just simple pry bars. Certainly worked harder and not smarter that time, but now I know for the future that if something should happen, I can kind of handle it at least and get it going again. So we're going to check the oil level, and then we're going to start this up. So I just checked the dipstick. I'm exactly at the fill line, so I'm by the book with how much fluid should be in that crankcase. So let's get this started. We'll see how. I think there's enough diesel in it to idle for a little while at least. I should check my gas gauge, I guess. Okay, I got about 1.5 inches of fuel. That's got to be something. Lots of wasp nests on this thing since it's been sitting. All right, so now we can see how easy this wants to start. I also added a charge lamp for the alternator. So fuel pump's on, I can hear it. Charging. Wait for oil pressure. All right. Normally around 30 at idle is what I expect to see. I'm gonna add a bit of water to the radiator just to make sure we don't overheat. And we're gonna sit here and let this thing run for a while. Okay, we are just past the 40-minute mark of idling here. Got it at about 1,000 RPM. Oil pressure still looks good. So at about 45 minutes, I'm gonna shut it off and let it sit. I'm gonna let all the oil fall back into the oil pan and settle. So I'll let it sit for 20 minutes, half an hour, or something like that. And then we're gonna check the oil level and see if we've raised the level at all, which is what we don't want. We want it to stay where it's at because that means there's no fuel leaking in. Sounds pretty strong. Not puking out any smoke, unless I hammer on the gas. Maybe we got it sorted out finally. Next I gotta deal with all those wasps that made nests inside the fenders. Maybe I'll attack it with the power washer and that'll help me out a little bit. Okay, so we ran it for about 45 minutes and it's been sitting for about the same. So now we're gonna check the dipstick. And it so far appears that it's in exactly the same spot that it was when we started. Which is good. That means that we don't have a fuel leak from the main pump that I can tell yet. So hopefully we can keep running this thing now and actually try it out with moving some soil and other things around the yard here and get an idea of what we're up against. But now I'm gonna have to deal with the radiator because it has been leaking. So the number one goal was to fix the fuel problem, and then once that's solved, the radiator, I keep topping it up with just water. So it's okay right now because it's summertime, but come the cold, if this was to freeze, it would cause a lot of damage. So I'm gonna have to yank that radiator after we've given this thing a road test, so to speak, and then we'll get the rad redone so there's no more leaks, put her back together, fill it with coolant, and then we'll be cooking with gas, if you know what I'm saying. So, all right, small little update on the backhoe, but that's where we're at now. So thanks for watching, folks, and we'll see you in the next round. Cheers. Welcome back, everybody. I'm sure based on the title screen of this video, you have an idea of what's going on. I'm in the Yukon, and I've got about an hour drive ahead of me, so I'll save you the boring details, and I'll see you in a second.